YouTube channel. This is our South Russell Village Council meeting. Today is today is Monday, April the 11th, 2022. Please put your hand over your heart and join us in our Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Please be seated. Mr. Officer, will take the roll.
Love.
Here.
Berger.
Here.
Canton.
Here.
Cavanaugh. Here. Licky.
Here.
Porter.
Here. We have minutes of our regular council meeting on Monday, March 28th. Any changes or corrections to the minutes?
I have two minor corrections.
What page?
Page 4,
Page 4.
where finance committee starts better is just pick. It's,
Yeah, it's spelled two different ways.
Two different ways, yeah. and then, page 5, where the Licky made a motion that council laid across of the very first paragraph, there's just no second in there. It's not huge, we just need a second.
Okay, thank you.
All right, any other changes to the minutes? If not, we have a motion to approve the minutes.
So moved.
Moved by Porter,
Second.
seconded by Berger. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Minutes are approved. Okay, we have one visitor planned tonight, Rich Hopper. Rich, I think you know the routine, but I'll go over it anyway. We give you 5 minutes. We ask you to stand, give your name and address. At the end of the 3 minutes, I'll stick up 2 fingers to let you know you got about 2 minutes left. After your 5, if we have questions, we'll ask them. We may respond, we may not. So, all right.
Thank you, Mayor. Rich Haber, 27 Pawpaw Lake Drive. I am the new president of Pawpaw Lake. And for the new members of council, let me give you a quick background of the reason I'm here. We have come before council on a number of occasions dealing with looking for assistance in redoing our roads with no success. Ken Christensen, the prior president, has been dealing with council and the mayor for quite a long time and dealing with dredging of our silt pond because of silt that accumulated after the Dominion East Ohio project along Washington, or Bell. Thus far, there's been no response from the village other than what appears to be an unwillingness to help. Pawpaw Lake firmly believes that Dominion and the village have responsibility for what's happened in our silt pond. We dredged our silt pond back in 2015 or 16. Prior to that time, it had not been dredged since 2000. After we dredged it in 2016, it filled up within 2 years, right after the Dominion East Ohio project. We have photographs that show the silt that's going down the road. The reality is that since that time, it's been accelerating. We now have to dredge it again 5 years later. It's going to cost the community $50,000. Our community gets virtually, other than Chief Rizzo and his services, we get virtually no services from Pawpaw Lake for our tax dollars. We need help for our community in dealing with the lake. Our lake, we didn't get it with the roads, but our lake is different. You can call it a private lake, but at the end of the day, silt and water flows through our lake from everywhere else in South Russell and beyond. It's filling up our lake to the point where we now have to dredge not just the silt pond, we have to dredge the lake. The lake is ultimately probably going to be somewhere to the tune of $300,000. Our community does not have the ability to fund these projects. We have some people that can write that check, but most of the people in the community can't. I reached out to the mayor when I became president in January because I'm a little different than Ken Christensen. Ken has patience with the process. Ken prepared an EPA complaint. He was prepared to file it with respect to the silt pond. He waited because he was waiting for an answer from village council. That answer hasn't been forthcoming. I have less patience for the process. I have a busy legal practice. I have to-do lists for Paw Paw Lake, and one of the things is get a response, yea or nay, from village council. And if there isn't gonna be any assistance to help us with dredging the lake, then it's file the EPA complaint and evaluate our legal options. It's not a threat, it's just, I'm fine with whatever your response is, but I'm no longer gonna kick this can down the road. So I'm here to tell you, I told the mayor when I met in January, I reached out to him after I saw recent minutes that showed that you were willing to help with dams for other communities and dredging of other lakes, and we've received no response, mainly because we don't come here and complain all the time. But we need a response. If we don't have a response, then my job is to move forward. And I'm gonna move forward because I want it off my plate, and I want it off the Paw Paw Lake's plate. If the EPA tells us we're full of it, and they come back and say you're on your own, so be it. But we're no longer gonna wait. We want a response from the village council. We'd like to partner with you and get this resolved collaboratively, but if we can't, we're done waiting. We're gonna move forward with dredging this year because otherwise if we don't, we're gonna create a dam under that bridge and we're just gonna back up the water because it's practically filled in at this point. So that's all I've got. I came here to tell you that it's time for a solution one way or another, and so we're prepared to move forward.
Questions from council?
Yeah, real briefly, I'm not familiar, what exactly would EPA complaint be?
Because we're talking about the lake and the quality of the lake. When the silt pond fills in, the quality of our lake degrades, and so the EPA, according to Kent and looking at the complaint, he's reached out and spoken with a number of people in the EPA, and apparently the EPA is interested in evaluating the health of the lake and the quality of the water that's being created by this problem with the silt pond. Well, basically what we now have is you have islands and peninsulas that are developing in our silt pond, but if you go into our lake now, the southern portion of our lake is so shallow that we are now having significant algae problems. We're ultimately going to have to incur additional expense to bring in third-party contractors to treat the lake again because we can't manage it because it's so shallow. The temperature of the water heats up so significantly. All of this is caused by a significant amount of silt that's running into the silt pond and as a result into the lake. The reality is it doesn't come from us. It comes from everywhere else. It came from that project. It comes from projects that are downstream. We have problems with fertilizer that's flowing there. That's a whole watershed management issue that's a little bit different, but we just decided Kent's initiative was to get the EPA involved. Now that I'm the president, I've got the complaint. I'm not gonna sit there and kick it down the road for a year or two. We gotta move forward with this thing. So,
Where does Paw Paw go to, where's the water?
It flows in the north into Silver Creek, goes into Russell Township, eventually crosses under 306, about a mile north of the Russell Police and Fire Station. It's a big,
Westwoods area?
It
goes west from West
goes
Woods.
straight into West Deer Lakes, so we access that off of Music Street.
Deer Lake just a year ago dredged their lake as well. They don't have the same problem as silt pond that we have. So, if there's any other questions, but I came for the purpose of letting you know and giving an answer and otherwise we're moving forward.
Thank you. I won't respond right now, but I'll get back to you tomorrow.
Thank you, appreciate it.
All right? Patrick, if you're not on the schedule, do you want to address council?
No. I yield the balance of my time.
Okay, we are now at the mayor's report. On the Both Springs, got a letter communication from Chagrin Center. This is very similar to what we received a couple of years ago, dealing with athletic fields on the East Washington side. I just simply scheduled a property committee meeting. Hopefully, I didn't ask the property committee chair. I just scheduled a meeting with these people coming up later in April, which deals with hearing what they have to say. I think what you're looking at is probably $1 million project. Some of us have been down the road before. My opinion is I'm going to gladly sit with them and hear what they have to say, and we'll do it as a property committee meeting. But I've also said I have never, in the 16 years we've owned the park, seen an athletic practice on East Washington side. So I don't know how the demand is. However, at the Country Estates Homeowners Association meeting, I discussed it with some of the people there, and they have expressed their interest also. They had heard this was coming our way, but it'll simply be an initial meeting coming up in end of April. Secondly, you have in front of you a village, a South Russell map that's on a 14-inch piece of paper. It's got 11 numbers on it. The 11 numbers are explained a little bit on the flip side, but basically this was used to explain to, again, the Country Estates Homeowners Association where their tax money is going, what we have going now. The numbers that I have are pretty much high numbers. They do not include the hundreds of thousands of dollars that Eric has brought to us. And I'll just do one example of central retention. Number 2, the central retention basin. Arthur's giving us, I think, almost $390,000 on probably a $500,000 project. And there's other situations there. I think you've all heard about them before. But basically, just to let people know, those are the projects coming our way, and kind of explains to the residents, because, you know, if you live west of Chillicothe, a lot of people don't know anything that's going on east of Chillicothe, which is kind of surprising, but it's also true. So that's just one of the things in the mayor's report. Second thing, I revised the mayor's report that you got in your packet. I revised pages 1 and 2. There's a lot of different meetings coming up, some different opinions that I just poured out to you, my opinions on certain things as to what we should or should not do. Over the next week, check out some of the things, and then get back to me if you have any questions or comments or concerns. I did put in my opinion about how to use Village Hall, the park, pavilion, and property. And that also will kind of end up with a property committee. There's a lot of things going on. Spring has hit, as you said, and I'll leave it at that. Questions of the mayor?
Mayor, I do notice on your tax money usage zoning map, and item 3, you indicate, it's gonna be $2,000 for 20 years. Is that in fact the bond council's negotiated cost, or is it just speculation?
It's just speculation.
Is that
What we
people-
thought from the first, that to get $400,000, it'd take about $2,000 a year for 20 years.
Okay. I would just refrain from utilizing those figures if we don't have the actual costs from the bond council. And that was brought up on a previous financial committee meeting. And again, I would offer, please don't speculate on the cost, because people then can think this is when it's going to cost us, and when it costs more, then they feel like they've been lied to. So just a comment.
Any other questions of the mayor? All right, thank you. We are at the fiscal officer.
I distributed my monthly reports, my meeting report to Mayor and Council. I don't know if there are any questions.
Danielle, concerning the process you wish to have created, concerning purchasing things at the park and all that, I mean, right now, if someone wants to buy a bench, they might call you and say, I would like to buy a bench. Then I'm sorry, then you would come in with a check, and then you would take the check, and you would deposit it in the bank. And then maybe contact him to pay the, you guys have any benches over there? Where there's one that needs to be ordered, and then his individuals who work for him go and place the bench in the park. Is that how it's done now?
Well, how the mayor's been handling all the purchases, and then, I take the money deposited in, and then soon as the mayor, somebody orders the benches, and then, sign off on it and pay the bill. So that's, now that we're getting more requests, and I believe just about our benches, I don't know what the process is going forward. And that's why I'm asking for it to be written down. Are we still gonna be selling benches? Are we still charging the same amount? Do we have a plan where they're going? And who is the one selling, who is the one, getting all the arrangements made for it? To have a plan in place, a process in place.
Okay. Is this something we should work through CP?
No, I don't think so. I mean, I can meet with the property student for like a year and
That
5 days.
would be good.
I don't think it's very difficult to do. I just need something arranged.
Excellent. Thank
Cindy, I just want to give my kudos today to Brian once again, because at the 11th hour after 4 o'clock today, we got the contract for the, between the village and specialized construction. So solicitor reviewed that late this afternoon, as well as the petition for the parking ban, which I just passed out. Solicitor was in contact with the bond council about adding additional verbiage, so that's in there. And then the other thing is the HR committee met, and for parting gifts for boards, they wanted to give them, give these members, people leading the boards, a gift card to a restaurant in the village. So given that we're always trained, big partner, no, I asked the solicitor, so, you know,
Sure, so, actually, the auditor of state was also very helpful, in giving some guidance. So, gift cards as tokens of appreciation for board members is probably going to be okay, as long as the legislative authority council determines that it's for a public purpose, and it cannot be arbitrary or incorrect. And when I think of the word arbitrary, I think it has to be consistent. So, when I think of board members, I think we're thinking of Board of Zoning Appeals members. I'm assuming we're also considering planning commission members who term off or their terms expire or they're done with their service, and including ARB, because that is slightly separate. If you recall, BZA members and most of planning commissions serve without any kind of, there's no stipend, there's no fee, there's no compensation. ARB, if I'm not mistaken, maybe receive a stipend. So you just have to be consistent, that's it. But it does require an ordinance or a resolution. So it's not just giving everyone someone a gift card, and I think that's actually really important. The auditor of state put out 2 bulletins about this, and so did the attorney general. So I mean, it's for real.
So a resolution for each person, or
You could do, you see, that's a really good question. So yes, you could do that, but I was thinking, I think maybe the more efficient would be a general ordinance that would apply to specific, board members that are retiring or turning off, or whatever you want to call it. But again, keep in mind when you say board members, does that include architectural review board members? Does it also include planning commission members? That's my question. And right, and then there's obviously, Dennis, previously served as the council rep to planning commission. He was a member, he turned off. Now Mark Porter is on it, and Mayor, you serve as well. So the point is you have to be consistent. I know. This reminds me of that meal that you guys are thinking of having at council one. It's the exact same, no joke, it's the exact same Ohio Attorney General thing. That applies.
what was the first part you said, Brian?
The appreciation luncheon.
No. Do you remember when council wanted to have a special council meeting or a work session and wanted to have dinner? Okay, it's the exact same Attorney General opinion. I can send it to all of you, from 1982.
So that would be okay to have,
Correct. And you have to have an ordinance that says it's for a public purpose, and we actually revised the ordinance to include that.
so next time we can eat.
It has to be special, but yes.
So meetings listed in the ordinance, what I mean, you're allowed to have to.
And the very first thing you said was something like for the public good, so.
public purpose. You have to, there's a determination that says that these gift card, you know, for instance, you're trying to recognize public service and, you know, volunteer and that sort of thing. Okay, that's why I'm thinking of the ARB, number one. And number two, is it going to also apply to employees? And the reason I ask is, again, we just want to be clear in our ordinance, our resolution.
Mr. Mayor, can I suggest that this issue be directed to the HR committee to come up with a draft ordinance for council's consideration? And we'll work out the details of who it affects and how it affects.
You're having a special HR meeting Thursday morning, 8 o'clock. Can we add that to the agenda?
Discussion.
I just want to discuss.
Well, that, okay, so I didn't know there was an HR meeting on Thursday morning at 8 o'clock.
That's the presentation.
Well, okay.
Well, it's not sunshine, so if we're having a meeting.
So yes, the agenda could include that.
Yes, it
Yeah.
could,
You have to put it
yes, but we have to sunshine it and put the special agenda. Okay,
So we'll work on it after this meeting tonight, get organized.
there you go.
Thank you for taking that on.
Yep.
Just to get a general question, so this could be for anybody you wanted to give a gift card to, if you can come up with specifics. I'm thinking of the people who served on the park committee for many years, who get, you know, just like just like the planning commission or the BZA. That's just gonna be one of the issues
Sure.
we start thinking about.
It's the arbitrariness or the inconsistency, that's all. And if you've ever had any ad hoc committees that have never received any token of appreciation, you just have to be careful. And the auditor of state is going to be aware that these are going out. And it's going to want to see that legislation, no question.
Bruce, if you don't mind, since if you and Chris stay out, there'll be a meeting, maybe Chris and I get started, and we'll try to have something ready for Thursday morning, and we'll let Danielle know what the agenda is tomorrow morning. And you're already gonna get ahead of it.
So Brady, would it include like previous committees that have since been disbanded?
I mean, that's my
You
question.
have cemetery committees, you have emergency response committees, you have several ad hoc committees that no longer.
You know what, now that I think about it, no, you know what, the law actually says it's prospective only. So we cannot go back. In other words, people who, that's right, I apologize, that's a gigantic, part of the OAG committee. I will send this all to you so that you know, but it is prospective only, going forward, not retroactive.
So we could do like the baseball players, we could put David Nichols on the BZA for one meeting, and then say,
He's already received, right,
he got a $10 jug of maybe.
they're only $10, those are usually good.
Okay, fiscal officer, you still have the floor.
That's all I have.
Questions of the fiscal officer? Fiscal auditor, you're up, Adam.
Thank you, Mayor. So I distribute a copy of my report for the month ended March 31st, 2022, to Mayor and Council. First page report shows the fund balances as of the end of the month. There is a new fund listed. It is Fund B11, Parkland Dam. So new one for March. Then at the bottom, you'll see a total all funds are just under $3.9 million. Look, almost equally to money within checking and Star Ohio, a little bit more heavily with resources bank account. You'll notice the interest rate is noted next to Star Ohio. It is increased, so it went from 15 basis points to 36 basis points. So it's actually kind of helpful. On the second page, you'll note that for the month of March, our fund balance has increased by $178,000. So we're up about $293 for the year. March is usually a good month. As you can see, we received quite a bit of real estate taxes. Right? We generally get those at 2 points in the year, again, February, March, and we get them again in like July, August. So, it's appropriately close to half the budget right there on the far right side. You see we're at 42% right now, and that's before the homestead money comes in. We did get some grants during the month of March. We got a Go Green grant from Doug County for recycle picnic ticket. And then, that was the largest part of that number, and then we also got a ARPA fund grant, NEU grant, ARPA fund. So, thought I'd point those out to you. Other than that, nothing out of the ordinary. So cemetery seems real active, right? Seeing, over our budget already, what we expected to get the cemetery fees. So, and plot sales seem strong as well, so all is well there. And that's all I have. Any questions for me?
And real fast, is there a time of year generally when liquor permits come in, or is?
Yeah, later in the year, so all of a sudden it'll look like we're struggling with that, and then boom, we'll usually go with the budget, and then usually one big check, it's right over.
So with the Go Green thing, do we get picnic tables or what is that?
I don't know, I just saw the money coming.
That was for recycling old ones, is that right?
We made a $5 grant for, I think it's $2,500.
Yes.
2 picnic tables, one for the playground, one somewhere else.
You buy them?
Hmm?
You buy new
We
ones?
had to put the money up front, and then they gave us back, it's 2,500, as a swap, 2,500.
How many tables?
And two picnic tables.
Okay.
And then reimbursed, yeah.
Yeah, reimbursed, and then we got 3,500 this year to buy dumpsters for trash day.
That's not bad. Okay.
To pay for the service of the council, right?
I don't know which one. Basically,
It's to rent them.
Revenue.
Okay.
To bring them in and dispose of the waste that's in them.
it's just you.
Everybody, which is gonna cover half of the dumpster bonds.
Great.
It's normally $7.
They, right now, they have, obviously, money they're trying to get rid of, because we went from 2,500 to 3,500, and we'll keep an eye out for next year for sure now, that's what they're gonna do.
Sure, I've got one more thing to add. Fund balances on the front page, which were arrived at independently, do match the fund balances that Danielle had put together for her part. So should you choose to approve the fund balances, so you can do so with confidence.
Any other questions of the fiscal auditor? Finance committee, you're up.
All right, 2 items of discussion. The first, I'm going to flip-flop them from the order that they appear on the agenda. And strategic planning session. Hopefully, all members of council saw the correspondence from Councilman Porter, the 2 suggested days in September to do strategic planning. And that was the 12th and the 21st of September. So I'd like to first open it to discussion. Mark, I don't know what kind of response you got, in case it was just to you, if any. But, I'd like to open that up for discussion of council to say, let's try and arrive at a date before we go on to next month.
So far, I've heard from 2 other council members, and if anyone has a preference about the September 12th or the 21st, now is a great time to bring it up. Otherwise, I'd like to establish the date so we can do some planning. And it'll be 5:30 at Village Hall, depending on how the ordinance is written for the pizza. We would either have it or not, one way or the other, or it might be donated, that's possible too. So if other council members would weigh in and let me know, I would appreciate it. And we can't do it tonight, or the mayor can't do it at all. Yeah.
21st, we tentatively have a BZA meeting. But they met 8 of the 12 times last year, so.
I think the primary date was the 12th. anyway.
12 was, so.
Any objections to the 12th?
It's before council for you workers.
Yes.
My question is, what is the agenda of this? Are we doing just a 1-year plan, or are we doing
Well,
a strategic plan?
Quite frankly, the finance committee, if we were looking at a 5-year plan, you can't do a 5-year plan in a couple hours. So if we are looking at those September dates in advance of putting together a budget for next year in the first week of October, I don't foresee that we could have anything beyond a 1-year plan in terms of strategic planning. But it will help us to identify projects equipment, those type of things, those capital expenditures that we are looking at for the year 2023. Now, open for discussion, and follow on is, and I think, Chris, you may have mentioned it at a previous meeting when we talked about strategic plan. Having a 5-year plan is a good thing. We've never gotten there so far in the past couple of years, okay? But I would offer that, at the conclusion of next year's meeting, we continue the strategic plan with a view to the 5-year plan as to what we want South Russell Village to look like. So, and it might be a 1, 3, and a 5, snapshot in there. But yeah, I wholeheartedly support going forward for a 5-year plan.
I think it's imperative, but remember, planning for 1 year, definitely can't do that in 1.5, 5-year plan, so. Unless we're really smart.
Just because we have a meeting September 12th, that doesn't mean it necessarily is the only meeting.
Right.
I mean, that's the way I see it, is if you pick the 12th, 5:30, and then the council meeting at 7, you don't have a lot of time, but it also depends on preparation too. For the council members to come in, the department head input, who has identified, this is what we're going to need a year from now, 3 years, or 5 years from now. And my idea is to build on the first meeting so that we come back and do another meeting if we need to, and it sounds like we will, down the road. Because strategic vision, I always thought was 5 years. You look at 5 years, maybe 10. You think, what are we going to do in 10 years? What will we need to do? Like, do we need to do Bell Road West again? I mean, until now, I had never even thought of that possibility, but sure enough, it will happen. Bell Road East, for sure. Maybe next year.
Maybe the year after, but yeah.
I mean, that's a big knock to the budget. But fortunately, as Adam has pointed out, you've got the funds to do these sorts of things when needed. And home businesses and people keep working from home rather than elsewhere, it may continue. So we should bear that in mind for these major projects that we see coming.
So we'll put September 12th at 5:30 for the strategic plan.
Sounds good.
I did reach out to Cleveland State to get some names of professionals set up with that, and I haven't heard back yet, so I'll find out this week. The other thing is, can we set up our budget work session?
Well, that's the next topic.
I'm sorry.
Okay, but we had to establish a strategic plan date before we could talk about the budget week's work session. Now, previous discussion at the last council meeting indicated first week of October was being targeted for that. And I think it might have been the 4th of October that the mayor originally proposed. So, open to discussion.
October 4th would be our meeting at 5.
Yes.
So maybe the Monday the 30th.
Monday the 3rd at 5 o'clock is what I have.
October 4th, I didn't hear that.
October 3rd at 5 o'clock is what I have. For the budget work session.
Any objections by council?
What time is it?
5 o'clock, October the 3rd.
And there is two at that one, that's in the middle.
That's it. Let's see. Next meeting of the finance committee is this Friday at 9 a.m. at the village hall. Subject to any questions, that concludes the report of finance committee.
Fund balance.
Let me add on to that, please. I want to inform council that this past week, I had a phone conversation with the county auditor. One of the issues that came up last August at the budget committee for the county was an issue of reserve funds for special projects. One of the concerns was voiced to us that if we establish reserve funds, that if we, as council, decided that we weren't going to spend the money, that undoing reserve funds would be difficult. There's confusion between the concept of a restricted fund and a reserve fund. And without getting technical, the restrictive fund is very restricted. It would actually require a court hearing in order to get it undone. A reserve fund is not, okay? The only requirement of a reserve fund is that wherever the money came from to go into the reserve fund, if we undo it, the money has to go back to where it came from. So if it comes out of the general fund, goes into a reserve fund, we decide we don't need to spend the money or we change our priorities, we can undo the reserve fund and the money goes back in the general fund. But what it does is it allows us to target projects and assign funding to it. And we don't have to fund them completely. So Bell Road East, if that's a $800,000 project, we could start a reserve fund and we could put $300,000 in it today. And we could add another couple $100,000 to it next year. And so that when we're ready, we have the funds set aside to actually do the project. Okay? I just want to make council aware that having reserve funds is not tying our hands in terms of how we operate, but it is a good fiscal planning tool in order to marry funds to projects and to dedicate ourselves to actually accomplishing that. So it was a good conversation. The auditor was very helpful, and I've got other comments on ESIDs coming in the public utilities. So that's what I have to say on that.
It's pretty much like a household budget.
It is. The only difference is when you take money out, if you say, if you have a reserve fund of $500,000, you can't say, oh, I'm gonna take 100 out of it and move it somewhere else. When you close a reserve fund, you have to close it entirely. You have to zero it out, put all the money back in the general fund. Now, you could create a new reserve fund and put money back into it at a lesser amount. I mean, there's a methodology to this, but it simply indicates not only to the auditor, but to the public at large, that we are putting funding directly with projects. And so we don't end up with this general fund of several $1 million or whatever, and sort of this nebulous, well, yeah, we think we want to do this, but we're not really committed. This shows commitment. And that's the purpose of it, and that's what the budget board wanted to see from us. So as we move forward from here, moving towards August to another meeting in Chardon, I would hope that council would seriously consider ordinances establishing reserve funds for these specific projects.
Did he by chance say if he's gonna still do that training on that?
He did not, but he sent me a whole bunch of paperwork, which I'm happy to pass along to you,
That's all the reserve funds?
that talks about reserve funds and how they're put together. So we've got a roadmap.
Here's a question, Chris. Why would we ever use a restricted fund, or what would you use it for?
Everything's restricted. Our safety fund is restricted fund because it's a levy money that goes in, so it's restricted.
Okay, so that's your definite funds that you can count on, that are done, okay.
Mhm.
Right.
The levy funds, like, the street levy that the road levy that we
The
do.
road levy, okay, so we have our road and bridge, that has a levy that's restricted fund, but we also have, the street maintenance fund, well, that's a restricted fund, but it gets all its money from the general. So, when you set up the fund, you set up, what it can be spent on, and they're all restricted. The only ones that aren't restricted are your general and your income tax. And I was talking to the solicitor the other day, and I'm gonna try to put together a training for council on the different funds, how it all works, why we do transfers and all that. I'm hoping to do that within August, before we get into budget session time. So everybody can understand why we do the transfers, how the income tax comes in and goes out. And, it's confusing, but that's government accounting, so.
And that's all I have.
Okay. Before we relinquish the floor, I would like to make a motion that we approve as council the fund balance. So moved.
Seconded.
Discussion, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passed. Any other questions from the finance committee? I can't help but ask then, after sitting through 40-some minutes of second-class citizenship with the tax commission last year, that why, if that was the answer, us and a couple other communities, we've never heard about this, never been told about it. It simply could have been said, you know, why don't you guys do a reserve fund? Here's what you do, here's where you put your money. This would be a great idea. Versus you have all this money and you're hoarding money, you can't spend it fast, which is another issue later. So, one question on that, Chris, that I want to belabor. If Bell Road East is $1 million, we set aside $1 million, and then Eric comes up with 500,000 someplace, we would have to simply take the 500 out, but that's no big deal.
No, what you would have to do is undo the entire reserve fund for $1 million, put it all back in the general, and create a new reserve fund for Bell Road East for 500,000.
Okay.
I mean, it's a two-step process, but it is not an impossible process. It is done by ordinance. So, but it does not require us to go to court and get a court order to undo it. So it's in our control, in our hands.
So it'd be wise to estimate our permissive tax, right? So we know, so we don't overdo it, we don't shoot our goal. Because
So this is tax the county,
Yeah, the county.
that's what we're using right now for, what section
True,
of
but
Washington Street.
we would use it for Bell, right?
We could, there likely won't be any left, once we spend it all on Washington Street.
Right.
Well, Chris, I think you made my night. So, solicitor, the floor is yours.
I have nothing to report other than the legal research that I was asked to do regarding whether or not a village can donate public funds to a private 501c4. So I can wait to do that when we talk about the fire department donation, or we can do that.
Let's wait till it's on the safety committee. All right, Eric, floor is yours.
Thank you, Mayor. The police chief and I had a meeting this afternoon. It's a little bit last minute. Thank you, chief, for making that meeting, to review, the signal design that we have to date. There were a couple of, I thought it was a great conversation, so thank you for taking the time to be there, because you really made the meeting, and it gave us a lot to think about. Our OPWC preliminary estimate that I put together last year for the project was $292,000. It turns out that there are some interesting new technologies, newer technologies regarding cameras and monitoring that intersection that are available that we can incorporate into that signal project. The chief seemed pretty interested in those. Those improvements are ballpark $25,000. So that would bump our project cost estimate to around $317,000. Now, those are just very round numbers. We don't have. We're working on it. We're not there yet. A final, item detail. This is how many feet of conduit. This is how many feet of wire. This is how many, feet the mast arms need to span. But we're putting that together, and if council is okay with adding that camera monitoring system in, I think we'd get a lot of utility out of it.
Chief?
Yeah, I agree. It's a combination of two PTZ cameras that would feed directly into CBD and the police station.
I have no idea what you got.
Two camera systems, similar to the one up on the wall.
Let's say PT.
Hand tilt zoom,
Okay.
so you can maneuver it at your leisure. CBD can control it from the dispatch center. They can monitor live traffic. We can play back traffic crashes, thefts, traffic backup, things like that.
Right, and even live control over the timing of the light. If traffic's really backing up, Jay Koros, one of my chief design engineers for signalization and traffic, was able to patch in a live feed of it was a community in southern Ohio that they had just completed, and I was pretty impressed.
Brought the camera up online, and we can actually change the timing sequence of the traffic light in order to clear traffic if necessary.
Right there in the police front.
Yeah.
Well, no, you can do it as.
And well, you'd be able to do that too. I mean, whoever has access to control the signalization timing via those cameras, whether it's Traf Tech or whether it's Param or whether it's the police chief or all three, can make kind of live update changes, and that was a pretty compelling demonstration.
Yeah, it's pretty impressive.
So my fear, of course, is when we cut a culvert on 306 and the traffic backs up, you could manage that traffic.
We could. We can also manage it manually because we'll have a plunger device that would be in the traffic box. We can park the police car on the side of the road and use a remote control to actually control traffic. We can control the timing of the traffic light with that bypass switch. So, a lot of new improvement.
That's what some schools are doing now on the schools.
Yes.
Yeah, you just see the guy in the.
So the 692,000, that covers everything?
It was 292,000.
Oh,
The upgraded camera package, I guess, if you want to simplify it down in those terms, is about 25,000.
Would there be any reduction with the issue with the crosswalks?
No, because I didn't have those specifically delineated or called out in the initial OPWC ask. I mentioned that I kept it as generic as possible, so we're not locked into having to do specific things. We're replacing and upgrading the signal install. That gives us the freedom to basically do what we want and what we think is necessary.
Eric, originally we said the traffic light be like 300,000. You got, I can't remember how much you got for that.
I think it was 140 something thousand, I believe.
So,
Yeah.
But then if you add this in now.
We're right, that's 25, an additional 25,000 that'll come from the village's share.
so we're looking at maybe the whole project is 277,000. Yeah, you get to 100.
No. it-
107.
177.
Yeah, 177.
I would thought that.
Yeah, I like that number a lot more.
I was a student in that class.
So if that's something that the chief and I would really like to include in the initial design for the project, and if that's something that council's willing to entertain, I think it would be a worthwhile improvement and upgrade.
Safety would be good, adding this into that.
Adding the,
The extra
The cameras,
cameras at 25,000.
PCTs.
PTZ.
You're getting ready to go to bid for that, right?
No.
This would be one of those
we have
things
one
we didn't
design
know was
meeting
in
this
the budget.
afternoon. We'd be looking to go out to bid and give or take another month.
What's the storage time for the video? How long does it stay?
So what my plan would be is they would provide the camera systems. The camera system would feed into CBD. They would store all our data for us. Sugar Valley District. Yeah, that would, if we did it ourselves, we would need a server.
Right.
But we're gonna need a way to get the data to them, so we would likely, it would be a monthly fee of internet service, basically like our MBTs work on the Verizon network. It would be a radio. We just recently put those into the service department for fire alarms. So you get the two-way radio, cellular radio for a set cost, and there's a monthly fee for your over-the-air data, basically.
What CDP charges and everything for home?
Not for storage, no.
Excellent.
Next item, I had a conversation with our winning bidder, Specialized Construction, this afternoon about when are you looking, I advised them that council was likely going to be authorizing the base bid and both alternates. They were excited about that. And I asked, when are you gonna start? I know we haven't told you you're gonna sign the contracts yet, but I'm looking for a start date. And they said early May start. They're looking for, a little warmer temperatures and dry weather, more importantly. So they were shooting for early May.
I'm sorry, Eric, which project did they win the bid for?
The road program.
Thank you.
And last but not least, OPWC pre-application requests came out from, I believe it was last week, from the Geauga County Engineer's Office in our case, saying if you have PWC projects that you'd like to look to nominate for funding, please do so now. I know at our last streets committee meeting, we talked about a problematic culvert that we've got on Bell Road East. That I would like to, that at the time I was thinking, we should roll that, if we're gonna ask for, NOACA money or some funding mechanism to help offset the cost of, repaving Bell Road East, we should roll the culvert into that. It certainly wouldn't hurt to get it done ahead of time.
Which culvert are we talking about?
That would be the one that's,
On Jeff,
yeah, the Pond Chef. Yeah.
we fix a lot of problems.
There's a lot of issues with that culvert. As we've taken a look into the drainage area that kind of, it's tributary to the upstream end of that culvert. The upstream end really needs some pretty extensive rework, to get it across the road efficiently. And the downstream end of that culvert, believe it or not, needs some rework to get the water transmitted through. It's not so much undersized as it is, there's just restrictions along the way that cause things to back up. If council is open, I don't even know what a preliminary estimate would be. It'd probably be somewhere around 200,000 if I had to pin a number on it, roundly. I'd like to ask for some OPWC funding for replacing that culvert. I think I can make a compelling argument for that. It's just a pre-application. It doesn't bind us to anything. And they may tell us no, because we've been very, very successful in squeezing money out of OPWC for various projects the past handful of years. They may say you've had enough for a while, but it never hurts to ask.
Is this a motion or
To authorize him to go through the application,
simply a nod of the head? Can we do that, or?
a motion, I think.
Before we do that, where's Tom Jeff?
Okay, about 1567 Bell Road. They're just east of the large home at 1551. I would advise
Where
you.
the water used to go on the road. Okay.
Yeah. I advise you to-
That's where the water used to go on the road, exactly.
There's a driveway you can pull in there, and when you pull into the left there, you'll see a hole. And there are seven pipes that fill into this hole.
It's
The
an awful
culvert
spot.
then goes backwards, heads west. So he's hit it on the head. It's something you should see, just to see
I
it.
watched it for 24 years back in January.
It's kind of across from the new house that's going up way in the back. You can't see it.
Do we have any thoughts of what OPWC would grant to us?
I would ask for half.
Okay, is a reasonable, okay, so,
It gives us the most
so it's
sense.
100,000 from them and it's 100,000 from us.
Yeah, if I had to, I round numbers. I haven't really looked into exactly.
Mark, you wanna make the motion?
I'd like to make a motion that the engineer, mayor, and fiscal officer be authorized to submit a pre-application to OPWC for the purposes of obtaining funding to address the stormwater issue on the eastern side of the village. So,
Discussion. Derek, if we get this, you have 3 years to spend it, and we don't have to take it.
We don't have to take it, and a pre-application is very informal. It's pretty easy for me to put together and just submit for their consideration. If it looks like our pre-application is gonna pass muster and they're willing to throw some money our way, then I have to submit a final application. We'll have to have legislation and everything else to go with the final application. But it never hurts to put a pre-app together.
Any other discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes.
Thank you, council, and unless there's questions, that's all I've got for tonight.
Backing up to the traffic light, should we do two separate proposals, one with the camera system, one without, because we didn't budget for that?
As like an alternate,
Yes. Just make the council-
It doesn't hurt.
Decision at a later-
it doesn't hurt. We could have the base bid be the signal install and have an alternate A of that.
Is that acceptable?
I want
I think it's good.
it's good to know the cost, alternate A and the main base bid. We don't want to get surprised.
Right, it never hurts to break out an alternate.
Because we don't know what the budget is.
We just-
And we're not going to do that.
Well, we know what our target is.
You know that.
when you're ready to do the bid, then council at that time will make a motion to do the bid and go on more details.
Correct. Once we get the specs all fleshed out and the proposal items put together.
Thank you, Eric. Street Commissioner, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mayor. I submitted my monthly report for March. Are there any questions?
Kudos to the service department and Danielle as well for the funeral that was held on Sunday. I understand it was done well.
Yes. Very
That was less.
Family very appreciative.
Well, yes, her department had to take credit.
You talked about the piece of junk that's sitting out there that's no longer a piece of junk.
It used to be a piece of junk. It's a 96 roadside mower, and looking at the 5-year plan, we considered keeping that for a while and replacing the backhoe next year. That we just went front to back, replaced the clutch last year, and we just made it pretty this year. Replaced all the tires, painted all the rusted areas, removed the rust and painted it, and replaced all the blades, and it's a much better machine that we use probably a week a month, or 3 or 4 days a month in the summertime is all we use it for. The backhoe we use almost every day.
Looks great, yeah.
It looks good.
A little bit of welding in there too, wasn't
There was as we were clearing off the rust, we found a large crack in the main beam, which was ground out, welded, and put plates on it to hold it all together.
Before this, you would have thought that machine could have been in the county fair and the historic
Yeah.
tractor. Nice stuff. All right, we're
One
now,
more thing, I have the Earth Day, April 22nd, I contacted one of our local volunteers that wanted to do a cleanup of Bell Road, Chillicothe, and Washington Street in Snyder. They would work with the service department, we would all work together. It may be a weekend, and if I have the latitude to adjust the schedule to move the day off and not generate any overtime, I'd like to work on assisting the volunteers with the cleanup. We have possibly the road police car, have the trash bags, and as he passes by, so you can toss out bags, to keep the bags going, and we just drop the bags where they fill, and then we pick them up at the end of the day.
How do you keep people safe on 306? That's kind of scary.
These are all adults, these aren't children. No, we need to get all off the road.
They're in the ditches rather than.
They're in the ditches, yeah.
should we get a motion? Okay, we're gonna get a
We
motion.
could also do some sort of release from these volunteers. I mean, just other communities have had volunteers help out, and sometimes we get things, executed as far as release or a waiver. Just to be
Sure.
honest.
What day is that, Tammy?
They didn't set a date yet, somewhere around the 24th would be a Sunday, but the 22nd is Earth Day. So somewhere right around there, but we don't want to tie into the next week, which is trash week, we don't want to tie into that.
Would the volunteers be wearing reflective gear?
The county, this is all through Gotta Go Green, and they would provide all the bags, we wouldn't have to pay for those. And they provide shirts and vests and the grippers. The grippers would have to be returned, the shirts are either out of stock of, but I do believe we could get some vests to use.
It'd be a good idea just to keep people safe, even if they're in the ditches.
Sure. There's 20 in the beginning, but now we're down to like 10 plus us.
We have 10 vests we can loan from the police cars if need be.
So this motion would be to approve the event requiring with use of a permissions release slip or something.
If it's through the county, I wonder if the county has that.
I would think they do, because after they finish our part, they're gonna go the rest of the way to Washington.
That's what I thought, okay. But, is there a contact for the Go Green?
Yes,
Okay,
I have.
we have more time.
So
Okay.
just give them a buzz. I had a question on your 68 Waterford.
Hang on, Ruth, let's do our motion and
Sorry.
finish this off.
I move that the street commissioner, mayor, fiscal officer, and assistor be authorized to assist with the project known as Earth Day, the day after Earth Day, for cleaning out ditches and whatnot, along 306 East Washington Street and Bell Road. So long as there is a waiver of reliability executed by the volunteers. The volunteers wear appropriate safety gear want to amend his work schedule to ensure that the people from the street department who are doing this are properly compensated on an hourly basis rather than an overtime basis. So,
Saying that long.
Discussion.
I like to be comprehensive.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion passed. Good job. Can you, while you're talking, this Go Green has picked up in the past, and can you talk about the facility out at, the county, area that they just built?
The large one now is in Trumbull County. They want to duplicate that in Jogga County. And it would be off of Merritt Road, I believe, when it's finished. And they would take, like, normally we would take our refrigerators, air conditioners, heating unifiers, and put them in the metal dumpster. Now they're gonna go to the county, because they would take care of the Freon part, which is an additional cost to the shipper, to have that all remediated. So this would be taken care of out there.
So that will start this year or not?
That's gonna start this year.
Okay, great.
Are they recycling the free now?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, they have contractors coming and pull Freon out.
Is the facility open?
Not in Jogga County yet.
Okay, but it's close, I know.
Yes.
Any other questions of the street commissioner?
I just was gonna ask about that 68 Waterford separated 6-inch sanitary line. Was that a building accident or it just happened?
That just happened. It was from what Eric and I theorized, the sanitary sewer was put in 3 feet below the storm sewer. And as they were building Kensington, as they put the pipe in, they backfilled, then they put the laterals in for the storm sewer. Well, there was a joint right above where the sanitary sewer was. And the sanitary sewer, earth above it settled, and it pulled those pipes down with it, and it separated as it pulled down, which caused it to right back up.
It took 40 odd years for it to happen, but it eventually did fail there.
We are going the week of May 5th, week of May 16th. We're going to go every house that's on Kensington Circle and ask if we can camera their storm sewer. Because if you put dye in it, the dye will still flow through even if it's barely open. But this was Tim's idea. We picked May 16th. I don't know where you're getting the camera. Who's doing that?
I'll try the county or Sugar Falls. They both have cameras. Orange Village has a camera. Can check it either out.
Any other questions of the street commission? Thank you. Street committee.
Street committee, in a special meeting, April 5th, 9 a.m., consider the one bid we got with regard to the 2022 road program, which is specialized. The committee met and the committee's recommendation, correct me if I'm wrong, Chris, is that the base bid and the alternates, both of them, be part of the road program for 2022. The cost to the village approximately $675,000. And in light of that, we'll have to have an ordinance, I think, in order to move forward with specialized, but that is the committee's recommendation. We also talked about those minutes I sent to Danielle this afternoon, right before the power went out. So I'm hoping they got there, Danielle. If they did not, let me know and I'll resend them. But we also talked about the 319 at our earlier meeting, April 1st. We talked about the 319 grant area and the central retention basin area. Eric, can you bring us up to date on the removal of the brush and everything for those two?
Sure. As I'm sure council is aware, the trees that were of large enough diameter to qualify as bat habitat trees were taken down, were felled before the deadline for the not touching those trees that passed. It's Van Kuren Tree Clearing or Van Kuren Contracting or Construction was the bidder or the contractor that was the successful bidder to take those trees down and to clear those two areas. They are right now, they were in a mad rush to get those done because every other contract or every other construction project that required, bat tree removal in our region was under the same requirement by March 31st to have the trees at least felled. To date, they've not invoiced, we've not paid them any money, for the work they've done. They've got to come in and put, as part of their contract, put in 2 construction drives, construction entrances, stone construction entrances. They also need to put in anticipation of the lane clearing, erosion control around the streams and drainage channels. That work has not been done yet. I reached out on Friday to Van Kuren for a schedule and don't have anything back yet. But we haven't paid them anything, so we're not going to until they come and finish the work.
I understand that they were gonna do it in April or early May.
They initially had said they were in a big rush to get everything done. They got the trees felled and they would come back in April, which is now, to finish the work and clear the sites. Still anticipating a notification from them as to when they'll be back. I'll be sure to let Streets Committee and Utilities Committee know when that's going to occur.
Mayor, and next item on our list is the Federated Family Life Center's detention pond. And we had talked at the committee meeting about the possibility of splitting it with them. $7,400 that was estimated to be the cost of doing that. Has there been any follow-up from Family Life Center?
We're gonna meet with them next Wednesday, April 20th, 9 o'clock with them. We've had conversations, but basically, we've not done any face-to-face yet.
You know, one question there, and this may be for the solicitor, we talked at a previous council meeting about whether Bainbridge had easement for maintenance of that. Has any of those discussions taken place, or have we investigated whether there is an existing easement or not? Given the fact that this is private property, not in South Russell Village.
I have not been asked to look into that.
I looked into that and I did a pretty comprehensive look, and I was unable to find a dedicated drainage easement that was granted to the township, Bainbridge, to enter on to that property for, maintenance and such. I was not able to find an easement that existed there. So I'm not saying that there's not one, but I wasn't able to find one.
Should this potential discussion lead to a 50-50 split, would we need to negotiate an easement to conduct that work?
I don't think we should pursue an easement on that. I think just a work agreement to come in and do the work would be a more appropriate and a much easier thing to accomplish.
And the work agreement to conduct work using public funds on private property, is that an issue, Solicitor?
I don't know. I looked into that. I was asked just to start drafting the agreement, and I stopped, and then asked what the litigation costs would be if we pursued a public resource. So I would have to actually look at that question.
Yeah, we would want to know the answer to that before we went into anything official with anyone. But the mayor will be letting us know what Family Life Center's response is.
What their disposition is.
And see what they say. And we'll have to go from there. Next street committee meeting, I think it's scheduled for May 6th, 2022, at 7:30 a.m. in the street commissioner's office. Does that sound right? Okay. First Friday in May. Okay.
I have just one question. I think I heard it right. So Eric, I've had the neighbors ask me why they cut down that pine tree that's right in front on the 319. And so that's because it was bigger than the 3-inch diameter.
Correct.
So if you leave one tree there and bats can live in it, then scotches the whole thing.
Yes, there are ways around that. They're arduous and can be expensive. If we have a project that's receiving federal or state funding, which the 319 project is, there are alternates where you can hire experts to come in and do like a bat survey, where they monitor bat activity. I think they set up even recorders and maybe some nets to see if that is an active bat habitat. If it is, and you don't have the tree cut down by the 31st of March, you're kind of stuck with it there until the fall when you can cut it down again. Or if it's found that there's not bat activity there, then they can give you an exemption. But it's much more fail-safe to just get the trees down while we're legally allowed to take them down.
So is that that must be an EPA rule?
It is.
Thanks.
Are we on track for the bidding process for the central detention basin?
Yes, the restrictions are less for the central retention basin because we're not getting federal and state funding for that. It's 100% local. But I want to tie that project time-wise to the 319 grant project and have hopefully realize an economy of scale. If they're both bid at exactly the same time, perhaps the same contractor would be interested in both and would give a better price rather than bid them as, at different times, as they are separate projects, but I'd like to schedule them together.
When do we expect to go out for bid for those?
Interesting you should ask. I would have said we should have already been out to bid weeks and weeks ago. There was a question that came up through the Army Corps about habitat for animals other than the Indiana bat. And one of them was a turtle and the other one was a snake. Could we have potential habitat for those? And through some investigation, it turns out that no, we don't. But that investigation just concluded last week in discussion back and forth with the Army Corps. So I think we're all clear.
So when will we bid?
I would say comfortably within 2 weeks.
Can I ask a question? Sorry. The central detention basin, we are using ARPA funds. ARPA funds?
Yeah.
Are they restricted in any way?
We're treating the project like it is.
Okay.
We got all the bat trees cut down at the same time.
Yeah.
We're treating the project as if it is.
Okay.
We should be going out to bid just before the next council meeting.
Correct. I've already alerted contractors that this is coming. Please keep an eye, and I'll call them all again saying, okay, please get your plan sets.
But if we're gonna do this with Manor Brooks, right?
Mhm.
We can have I think, we need to revise scope, right? Because originally the RFP that we did, almost a year ago, we put it all 4 persons.
Correct. We have that revised still.
Okay, I didn't know that.
Yeah, we have that.
Okay.
So are we on track for late July, early August completion of the central detention basin?
Oh, yes.
And there is our final item for street committee would be, if you would like to make a motion acknowledging the Russell Township help for trash day coming up April 30th.
They have helped it, in the last several years, and they are willing to help us on that with 1 member and 2 men.
So they come, they're here on Saturday.
They show up before 8 o'clock.
Okay.
And they have a much larger load, or at least they did last year.
They might want to stay.
Yeah, that was really helpful for that snowmobile.
Right.
Second.
Discussion. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passed.
That's all for street.
Questions of the street committee? We're at the building committee.
Thank you very much, Mayor. Building met on April the 7th. The minutes were in the packet. Before I make any other comments or input. Okay, we were planning on having interviews today for the building zoning inspector, but it was canceled and it is being rescheduled for this coming Wednesday, April 13th at 4 p.m. at the Village Hall. Now, concerning forfeitures, tracking, and deposits, to have you try to explain this would be like trying to eat soup with a fork. So I am going to yield to our solicitor.
So, I think we spoke at the building committee meeting, regarding forfeiture process, and I think we talked about it even at the last council meeting, that the process that we have in the books is fine, it's okay by Ohio Revised Code and Ohio law. So I think the goal here is just trying to figure out exactly how long the deposits have been sitting, if they meet the forfeiture trigger, to start the process. So that is a Herculean task actually for Ruth, and she's working on it right now.
Very good. Now, in your packet, there was a document titled Building Committee Recommendations regarding refundable deposits. At this time, I'd like to make a motion to initiate the elimination of refundable portion of any fee for review by the BZA or PC, i.e. the Roman numerals 1 through 6.
Second.
Second, discussion. This is,
For an amendment.
this is for an amendment. This is gonna take some time, but we're just getting started. Any discussion on this? We're gonna see a lot more, there's gonna be, 6 different ordinances eventually?
Once, yeah, and again, this is assuming the planning is going to recommend.
Yes, we gotta go to the plan. So this, maybe at the end of the summer, we would have it all done.
Maybe.
All right, are there any questions? Been moved and seconded, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion passed.
That's all I have.
Questions on the building committee?
If I may, Mr. Bell.
I think we found during our committee that a lot of open cases of unclaimed funds, and it needs to be a lot of work for Ruth and the building department, but I think in time, we're gonna get through all the necessary steps, and I look forward to having a clean slate over there for the building department.
Chief, you're up.
Thank you very much. I submitted a month-end report in which I had to revise the plot area on my graph. It went off the charts for some reason in March. We had a record-breaking 203 in the activity column. We also had a record-breaking number of house checks. We had 86 homes on House Watch with 1,581 checks last month. One of the main reasons our numbers went up, weather got nice, traffic enforcement started going up. Compared to last year, this time we had a 536% increase in traffic warnings alone. So the guys are out there watching those hot spots and taking care of business. Other than that, I don't have anything else to report.
Questions of the police chief? Chief, under property damage, the tech rescue team, is that part of the hazmat group we're in, or?
No, it's a separate entity. Sugar and Fire contacts them directly. So if we have a structural issue with a home or a business, they'll page them out and they'll come out. They're out of Coyote County, but they're at our disposal.
Questions of the police chief? Safety committee.
Safety Committee met on 7 April. The minutes of that particular meeting are part of your council packages. One of the issues that the mayor wanted Safety Committee to tee up is to open discussion regarding the donation of Schrim Valley Fire Department / building expansion project. And the committee elected to open the discussion at today's council. So the floor is open to discuss the donation of approximately $70,000 to the Chagrin Falls Fire Department, which is a private nonprofit fire company.
If I may start.
Sure.
Solicitor, is this entire endeavor legal?
So, the question was whether or not the village can donate money to a private 501c3 nonprofit organization. And the answer is yes, it may. There's actually a statute that provides for this. It's oddly in Title 3 of the Ohio Revised Code, which usually only applies to counties. But it's actually in there. So it says, essentially, the legislative authority of a municipal corporation may give financial assistance to any nonprofit corporation engaged in promoting safety in this state. And it goes on to explain other things like ambulance service, emergency medical service. I mean, this is on point. What is required, however, is that the nonprofit corporation, so here Chagrin Valley Suburban the fire department would have to provide an audit each year of the funds and how they're dispersed and what they're used for from whomever is giving the donation. That is actually a requirement. So I will tell you, I did look at briefly the actual agreement and the escrow agreement. So your question, I think, is a little bit broader. Is all of that entirely legal? I think there is nothing in here about the audit, and that would be something I would definitely recommend. And again, I only looked at it for a minute today. I didn't, so that is definitely something we would want to ask some questions about. I had some other questions too, but the audit itself is in the statute, and that should be included in the agreement.
And I will tell you, in the discussion today with Chagrin Falls, there is no oversight of funds by any municipality dealing with the fire company, okay? So no municipality currently has any record of oversight, financial oversight, and the only municipality that ever votes on raises for the members of the fire company is Chagrin Falls Village. No, we then support those raises with our contractual services, but we have no say on voting on any of those raises for the fire company. So them being a private fire company, one of the things that they don't have to deal with is fiscal oversight by any municipality.
By municipality, that is very true. But again, keep in mind, this is a nonprofit corporation, so the members of that corporation have fiduciary duties. I mean, actually, almost as much. And I will say.
But it's all internal. They're looking at themselves.
Well, I mean, but they sometimes have independent audits. I don't know actually how they're structured. I would be amazed if they didn't have certain audits and actually met their auditing goals. But I will say that, again, the auditing part that's in the statute, I think would have to be part of this agreement. And the other thing is that you mentioned that, okay, sorry. So you mentioned that there's no municipality oversight, but again, with respect to this specific agreement and the escrow agreement, that would be some of the oversight function that we would want in there, is that either the escrow agent has some sort of oversight as to what has to be provided to the escrow agent in order to disperse. I mean, so there's instructions in there, but again, the auditing is important. And I'm not saying that the Chagrin Valley Suburban Fire, Department, the way that they're structured, I'm not saying at all that they're not auditing themselves. I'm saying in this agreement, there has to be an auditing function.
I noticed this, and it's the document that's community funding. Number 7, upon final completion of the improvements, any funds remaining in the escrow account will be remitted to the village of Chagrin Falls for the maintenance and operating costs of the fire station. So even if they don't spend, sounds like it open that pot.
Which is interesting. I mean, I'm wondering if there could be some conversation with, that's an interesting term that I would like to find out more. And again, maybe it's my, I just did not know how they're structured.
To me, and this isn't specific to Brighton, it seems like you're paying rent, and then the rent is your $35,000 a month, and then you're taking some other money. So I'm fuzzy on it. Maybe somebody can explain to me better.
Well, it's like the rental situation you described, that you give them the security deposit, you pay your rent, and at the end, they keep your security deposit.
Mr. Mayor, in previous discussions, do I recall correctly that there is to be an oversight board for the suburban fire department?
There is, I would say, it must be on paper, but I've heard.
On paper, they're supposed to have, and one person from each municipality is supposed to serve on a board overseeing their activities.
Yes.
But to our knowledge, that board has never met.
We met 2 years ago, and maybe 6 years, 4 years ago.
Okay, well, infrequent at best, okay? And the efficiency of their oversight is nominal,
That'd be generous.
okay? So I'm trying to be generous here. So, so it doesn't, the process doesn't meet all of the requirements for our contribution. We were hoping that when we agreed to a non-binding resolution to fund this, that they would go back and add additional
Verbiage.
safeguards, that they would come into compliance with their charter, which is to have an effective oversight board and to do this correctly. And they have not as yet met that need, from my opinion.
Okay.
So it sounds like the next step is we go back to them and say, hey, under the revised code, if we're gonna give you money, there has to be an audit.
There has to be an audit and there has to be an effective board managing the process, managing how they operate.
Well, there's also no verbiage, Chris, about it being a non-binding agreement.
No. Our previously council has approved this as a non-binding resolution.
Correct.
Right. Now we're getting to where the rubber meets the road and they're asking us to put the money in. And I'm saying, we went back with several questions and said, yes, in theory, we're supportive of what you're doing, but we want to see these issues addressed, and they haven't done that.
How about this? I, put in my mayor's report, I don't know if you saw it. Wednesday, April 27th, 9 o'clock, we have representatives of Chagrin Valley Fire Department and our finance committee meet here in a special finance committee meeting to talk about these issues.
Well, let's-
in there, Wednesday, what?
Let's clarify, is it Chagrin Valley Fire Department or is it Chagrin Valley Suburban?
No, they changed it. They've remarked it. Chagrin Valley Fire Department.
That's who they are now?
Yes, they are.
I'm sure there's no.
Okay, I apologize.
If I may make just one more point. If I'm not mistaken, the building in question is owned by the village of Sioux Falls.
I don't know that
Is
for
that-
sure.
I've heard that.
Believe that to be the case.
Okay,
For which a nominal rent of maybe $1 a year might be paid by a volunteer organization.
did the village of Sioux Falls ever think about putting a bond?
It's a good question.
Special improvement district?
I don't know.
No, I can understand the locales being served by fire department. They wanting to have, have some skin in the game, I understand that. But, the building is owned by the village of Chagrin Falls. Once all the modifications are completed, the village will still own the building. And you would think that initially they would have seeked a floating bond.
I can and cannot answer that. One of the reasons we are with the Chagrin Valley Dispatch is Chagrin Village could never pass a bond issue to build a police station. So that's one of the reasons Chagrin Valley Dispatch was created, is a facility was needed. And basically you had a couple of people over there in a closet and the wires under their feet, and every now and then they kicked the wires and they disconnected everything. So that's why we went to dispatch.
Well,
So,
the other argument with that, though, is that when the designs were being made for the Chagrin Falls Police Department, that maybe it was a bridge too far, that they were asking for a Taj Mahal. Now, that issue failed. However, police services still remain within Chagrin Falls. If the fire department did not get the improvements, or did not get the improvements funded through the means that they seek, we still have fire services.
And that raises the interesting question of, we contract with this organization. There are other alternatives. Okay? I'm not saying they're good alternatives or bad, but there are other alternatives.
There are.
Okay, so our contract comes due in January 1st, and it's normally a 3-year deal.
Correct.
Okay, what if we choose not to participate with them going forward?
Well, that question was raised a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
Prior to my joining council, but Nevertheless, the question remained, and there's a lot of variables. And, you know, it would take some extensive study that the mayor has actually asked that safety committee tee up investigating some of this stuff. But there's a lot of variables in terms of trying to find equity between villages. You know, we have to look at calls for service within the community, staffing, equipment, training, cost increases, whether they're private or public, you know, who funds the equipment and the building that those neighboring communities occupy as well. How do they capitalize? What's the oversight? You know, and a lot of specific capabilities. I believe the last time the village looked at this, you know, the big issue was potentially going either with Chagrin Falls or Russell. And there were a lot of similarities in the response times, okay? Additionally, you know, in a Russell contract, we received fire marshal services. In the Chagrin Falls contract, that's standalone for an additional $20K a year for fire marshal services. So it would take considerable study to take a look at some of these metrics to determine it. But, you know, to your point, Chris, yes, there are other communities.
Okay, so not knowing what the future holds, do we want to turn $70,000 over to this organization and potentially not utilize their services going forward?
And not receive our money then.
Not refundable.
Right.
Well, they're gonna expend those funds first.
Well, then why don't we do this? This is April. I think that's enough time to frankly survey Chagrin, Russell, Newberry, Bainbridge. I would advise that you hire somebody, somebody that's a specialist in fire departments and contracts to go out and do a request for proposals from the four. See if they will come up with a request for proposals and have this consultant or whatever person, because I think this is beyond our ability, have this person come up with a recommendation as to what we should do.
So we're currently under contract with Chagrin Valley through the end of this year.
To the end of the project.
Right, it gets renewed again in Massachusetts in November.
Yeah, I would say we do a two-pronged thing. I think you go out and you go with requests for proposals, but I also think you hire a consultant, somebody out there who can handle this. And then the other thing is, I think you go, frankly, on April 27th, 9 o'clock, you have Chagrin Falls come here and say, we have questions. We got these issues, we got issues of, an audit, oversight board, who owns the property, etc. We got issues. So invite them. That'll be Wednesday morning on April 27th at 9 o'clock, assuming that's going to be okay with them.
Is that the normal?
No,
Financial?
no, we're talking about a special council meeting. I would simply do the finance committee to get started, because we don't need 6 heads. Then we have a special finance committee meeting with Chagrin Valley Fire Department, and say we have questions about your upcoming contract, and we have questions about this, which is now basically a binding agreement.
I can't be here the 27th of April.
I think we should just start with the finance committee.
Chris, do you think that we need a special finance committee meeting or just invite them to a finance committee meeting? It's regular and scary.
I think whatever it takes to get us in the same room, we should do it.
Which
If they're available for us, then at our convenience, great. Otherwise, you know, this is important enough to make sure that we hear the issues out face to face.
We're being asked to give a lot of money to a private organization that does provide us fire service.
Yep, and they do a great job. I
No doubt about that.
have no qualms with their service.
And I can tell you, we went with Chagrin last time around, in part because their response time was slightly better than Russell, primarily because of proximity.
Well, I think that was a matter of dispute
There
because
was.
I think there was, and I might be wrong on this, but potentially former councilmen Carol and the mayor may have actually timed the distances between the two stations. And potentially, the data supported Russell having better response times from that data, but those were disputed by Fireman Vetter, who is the contractual point of contact for the Chagrin Falls Volunteer Fire Department. So, it's wise. The other thing that I'll just throw out, interestingly enough, which we haven't heard much of, and this is coming secondhand, but I believe Chagrin Falls may be about to receive $400,000 from Cuyahoga County, which comes from the community's part of funds from casino proceeds. But it'd be interesting to see how they intend to use those assets. But something that right now is second or third hand information, but may bear further looking into.
The only thing I've heard is, again, same rumors, where the all six agree, but I don't know if that's true or not.
All six of councilmen?
The six communities all support the Spring Valley Fire Department.
That is contingent on whether or not the county would maybe give the funds.
That's just what I heard. I haven't seen anything. So I think, so we don't belabor this all night. Let's go two-prong. I suggest you go two-prong. I think you get out. I think we should look for a fire contract consultant who does a request for proposals to the four neighboring, I don't know who else we want to provide fire service, than the people that touch us. And I also propose that if Chagrin agrees to meet on April 27th at 9 o'clock with the Finance Committee, we look into, now, on that meeting on April 27th at 9, we have the issue of an audit. We have the issue of the Oversight Committee. What else? So when I say I want to meet with them, we'll call the donation. What else do we want to talk to them about so that they're prepared?
Well, the fact that Councilman Galicki called them and asked when the next contract was going to be available, and it was, probably the end of October, beginning of November.
After our commitment.
Yeah, I mean, let's get the contract out on the table. And if we have to, I am not adverse to providing them $70,000, but I think it should be done in a contractual basis
Okay.
as part of the agreement.
Well, following the revised code.
Yeah, I mean,
But, the other
not
question
nice.
that we may ask them was a bond issue to the village, not our village, but the village that owns the property, ever considered.
All right.
I mean, it's a great way to fund,
I don't know about the bond, but they had a partial levies that went down.
were they operating though?
I don't know.
And that was,
Like operating levies?
yeah.
Well, it was to build a new police station, at least at one time.
Well, they had two at the same time. One was for operations
Yeah,
and one was for building the new building. The building got turned down,
right,
but it was police station and the operating got approved.
right.
All right.
And let's
So here we go.
take this back to finance and let's figure it out.
But,
On the finance, deal with finance, so we'll invite Chagrin Valley Fire Department to be here on April 27th, 9 o'clock. The issue is an audit. Number 2 is an oversight board. Number 3 is the donation itself. Number 4 is the contract, the next contract. Number 5 is the bond issue. And quite frankly, I'll tell them that are we going to look into hiring a fire contract consultant?
I don't think you have to tell them.
No, let's wait, and let's see what the results of that
And,
meeting are.
quite frankly, instead of providing them topics, you could say, we'd like to talk about this contract. Because there's a lot more questions, to Ruth's point about all the funds are gonna be turned over to them. There's an illusion that somehow after construction, the building will be turned over to Chagrin Falls Village, although Chagrin Falls Village owns the building right now, and I didn't see any property transferred to the volunteer fire department. There's just a lot of questions about that contract.
Okay, I will try to get him here on April 27th. You're bad on Tuesdays and Thursday mornings. Dennis, if there's something with you, and I'll let you know what we're gonna do. The comment I will make, and I made it before, there's 6 communities going into this contract. 2 of them have already sent their money. And the other 3, from what I know, and I'll know more next week, have no issue.
One of those 2 is Sherman Falls, isn't it?
No, it's Moreland Hills and Spring Falls Township. But anyhow, all right, we are now at, any other questions of the safety committee?
Okay, the one thing that I'd like to leave with is that, for everyone's information, the next meeting of the safety committee is the 5th of May. And that concludes it.
Questions of the safety committee? All right, we are at the HR committee.
Okay, thank you, Mayor. Human Resource Committee met on April 6th. I provided a draft of minutes. I was asked at the last council meeting to provide a draft of minutes with proposed action list as a way of promoting this methodology to other committees, so that it was easy to go to the action list and see who was responsible for things moving forward. I've given you that. I've also given you a 7-step guide to writing clear and concise meeting minutes. I use this in my organizational behavior classes and management classes. So I give that to you along with a sample for your reading pleasure if you're having trouble sleeping. As part of the committee meeting on April 6th, and I failed to put this in my notes, so I will amend my minutes. We discussed a situation with Patrolman Kevin Spackman. Through an error when he became a patrolman, not realizing the length of experience that he has, he was brought in at a Class C patrolman position, and he should have been brought in as a patrolman Class B. We would like to make a motion at this time to remedy that error effective April 16th, 2022.
Second.
Moved and seconded, discussion?
Retroactively paying.
No, it goes forward from April 16th.
And,
But it does correct the injustice.
Yeah,
and
make it retroactive.
You can't. I don't remember that. You couldn't do it. Address that point.
I don't have any idea, we just presented it as going forward.
For some reason.
When was he hired?
It was, June 2021, he was hired full-time. We hired him in 2020, part-time, October of 2020. He was hired June 1st, 2021, and we started him at Class C patrolman, which would have been a probationary amount for the first 6 months, but he qualified for Class B with his years of experience. So,
Seems we should be fair to him. We should have brought him in as a Class B.
I agree.
Okay.
we want that effective June 20th, 2021.
Was there a PERS issue or a any issue with respect to funding and
I don't know.
pensions?
I may have to defer to Danielle, I'm not sure.
It was
I don't know, but, so when he was hired, he would have gotten this pay for 6 months.
6 months, so it would have been in January. Yeah, so if you wanted to, like, you could be retroactive from
To
January.
January 1st of 2022.
Yeah.
Any reason we shouldn't or can't?
That makes it easier to be, yeah, there's so many big issues, but much easier.
What about years of service and things like that, as far as, I don't know, you guys some kind of
Last year's
seniority or none of
service,
that,
full
okay.
times.
Yeah.
But Not
You
just
just have
that.
the three,
Okay.
you just have the 3 levels.
And don't you look at that one again now, we're going to make this
So,
effective.
because Steve became full-time in June, right, so the 6 months would have taken him to just about January.
January 1st, yeah.
And he would have gotten what he's currently being paid for that first 6 months, and then in January, he would have been bumped to the class, he would have been bumped to the regular pay. Because anytime you hire somebody, a little bit less for the first 6 months, so if you change it to January 1st, and then just, figure out the pay differential. Going forward. And change it. So I guess if you do January 1st.
So to be fair, when Chief brought it to us at the HR committee, they were not looking, he was not looking to retroactively correct the issue, but to correct it going forward. Ruth, I'm gonna ask you, do you have any issue with January 1st?
No.
Okay, so the committee will recommend that the correction be effective January 1st, 2022. That's the motion.
Motion, second discussion. All those in favor say aye. Opposed? Good catch, everybody. Thank you. Motion passed.
Okay, updating you that we will have the appreciation luncheon take place on May 20th. From noon to 2 p.m. at the Village Pavilion, more details to come. And as part of the ordinances, in your packet, we will be, asking for the adoption of a salary tier schedule, which is also in your packet, and we will do 3 readings on that, so we'll do the first reading tonight. And subject to Councilmember Kavanaugh's comments, that concludes the report.
You covered everything, you did a great job.
Questions of the HR committee? Property, you're up.
Thank you very much, Mayor. Properties met on April 4th. Council has minutes. Before I make any more comments, are there any questions? Okay, going forward. Landscaping the north side of the hall. Danielle and Leslie were kind enough to offer their opinions.
Leslie got professional input from.
Okay, we'll give her credit. And I understand there's somewhere between 6 and 8 plants at $50 a plant. And would you refresh our memories, what type of plants again?
Something hydrangea.
Okay, very, very good. I believe properties would like to go forward with this. Is there, so what's the next step? The money's there, right? So we can go forward.
So then one of us, I could go over and what do I need? Purchase order?
No, handle it.
Okay, and service will,
I want to call it.
Okay, that's fine.
I think service department would actually plant them and.
exactly, is that correct?
Correct.
Very good, very good. Okay, village hall use policy, in your packet, mayor's report of April 11th. Committee looked at the usage, the bottom of the first page, options A through H, and I see where smoking and vaping was not permitted. Now that was added, very good. We're gonna open it up for any conversation. I mean, please take a look at this, and we think it's fine. Let's go forward with this. Is there any comments?
The current ordinance requires council approval, correct?
I would imagine.
Current ordinance, and this one's, this one kind of waives that unless council has an issue, correct?
Usage policies.
Which one?
You need an ordinance to change an ordinance.
Right, we can't do this just by motion, Jerry. Yes.
So we have to have a motion.
We have an ordinance.
An
You
ordinance.
can't just do this by motion.
Okay, so the next step is,
An ordinance amending the village hall use policy.
okay, and that's something you
Sure.
will do.
Could I have the actual, changes? I don't have them, I just have the current.
Okay. Bottom first page.
Thanks.
I mean, you see doing this on 3 readings, Jerry?
What do you think's best?
Probably. I mean, We're not talking about monumental changes.
Right, okay,
And that way you can just introduce the ordinance,
okay.
and then eventually, next council meeting, we'll have the actual text in front of us for discussion and debate,
Very good,
and then we can do the 2 and 3 readings.
okay, very good.
So this will be a little bit of a change as to what's kind of happening now, right? Because it says the use of the electronic equipment will not be permitted.
We
Well-
are electronic.
Right.
Yeah.
The old, policy, I believe, permitted smoking on the premises.
No, I understand, I'm talking about the electronic equipment. Isn't it being used now by HOA?
I don't think,
I believe we did.
I can't remember, I used it for the meetings, but I can't recall doing it for anybody.
Well, but is that going to be what kind of happens? Will you be here then for me? I just want to make sure I understand. Because these were in your mayor report, but I don't remember seeing these actually in.
That's the one that's I won't be here.
Right, so that's why I just want to make sure I understand that this is the recommendation of the properties committee.
So if a resident came in and wanted to borrow the phone, because they had a flat tire in the parking lot, we would not be able to allow that.
I'm just trying to, I would think the electronic equipment would be the computer equipment or whatever, but I don't know. I mean,
The office doors
We
will
need
be
to
locked.
write the ordinance first before we,
well, this is, other than
all
seeing the
you're dealing
mayor's
with is a
report.
mayor's report,
Right.
the mayor's suggestions. Maybe it's more prudent to come up with a draft ordinance before and flesh these things out. There's no rush.
No, I have it here, that's fine. I just knew that the properties committee was considering something.
Yes, exactly.
Okay, got it.
So he could make a motion to have an ordinance for the use of Village Hall, first reading, done.
We don't even know the ordinance is.
Yes, it is.
First reading, should be drafted, we'll have the draft in front of you at the next meeting.
Then we got 2 other meetings.
But you need an ordinance to modify an ordinance,
Yes, we are amending.
Which you don't have.
which, you've got some suggested language, but you don't have the ordinance you plan on implementing it, at least initially. You can wait till the next meeting, Jerry, unless there's
There's no rush.
You can specify AV equipment for the
Yeah.
purposes of this.
Better than electronic, there you go.
just think through what might happen, if we have it in front of us next time, we got something better perhaps to work with.
From my experience as president of HOA, we would utilize the hall. We walked in, we had our meeting, we left. It was that simple.
Is that pre-COVID?
That was pre-COVID.
It's a lot different.
You may have people who want to attend their HOA meeting by Zoom or one of these. I think that's way more common now, perhaps we should consider that option.
We'd have to have someone here that can run
Yeah,
There would be, yeah, and there should be a cost for that. Have someone to handle that.
Something to consider. All right, we move on to the chamber. You wanna-
Yes, let's move on. The Chamber of Commerce summer concerts in the park,
We want those.
would like to see that go forward.
I do have a question for the mayor. Who provides the wine? Who's the wine person?
Wednesday.
They're not gonna do that.
We're not.
No, what they'll do, no. This year, it could be a hassle. They wanna make this first one good. So they will go through the use of the pavilion, which is what they normally do. There'll be 2 concerts. Chief, can you crack the window for room?
I'm sorry.
Tuesday, July the 12th, Billy Joel, Elton John, same guy that was here last year. Difference though, it's a 6:30 starting time because by 8:30 it's cold and people are leaving. And the second one is going to be an orchestra. They have 2 orchestras lined up. And that'll be on Tuesday, April the 9th, also at 6:30. August, yep, thanks. Once, that will come to council for approval, once they do the paperwork.
That's something that the committee would like to see us. move
That sounds really nice.
Right.
Glad I'm having that.
The WACA Climate Action Pledge is something that I see us bringing up and talking more about
I'm
next
gonna
time.
do that. We'll talk about it next time.
Okay. Streets Department door, something I brought up a little while back. Tim, do you happen to have another bid on this?
What I did is spoke to the contractor and he, the slip, the vendor was, I went directly to the vendor and I cut his price by buying the door directly. And then we're gonna pay the contractor to put it in.
Do we go through the 3 competitive bids?
There was, no one else came back.
Do we solicit?
They came, oh yeah, people measured it, they still never came back. I think they saw the price of the door, what they were doing, and they threw, they never really came back to their.
And what is the cost of the installation and the door itself?
$1,444.75 for the door, and it's from Carter Lumber in Middlefield, and $625 for the installation.
That's about half of what you initially
That's
thought.
pretty close.
Okay.
What's the problem with the door that needs replacing?
It's in horrible shape, it's a big large gap at the bottom, there's mice getting in it. It's compromising the interior walls now with moisture. The whole thing is
It's a exterior door?
exterior door.
I've seen it,
Okay. Now, Danielle, did you mention once that the cost of the door and insulating the attic fire station funds for that?
we have only the special ed building, so.
Okay, so we can go forward with both of these
These are not money, okay?
without a problem then? Very good.
Question for procedural wise.
Yes.
Do we really need to even bring this here? We know the police station attic needs insulation, we know the street department needs a new door. Is that something that all of us need to discuss, or is that something we should just turn the property committee loose on? I mean, it seems a little petty.
In the past, both things were discussed in the budget work session in the fall. Then we got to the notes, and then when we got to that point in the year, we don't bring it back to council. Because these are new things that we never discussed, and not everybody's aware of. In the past, council wants to be aware of what was going on, they just don't have any questions they want to know. I think you did bring it up in the fall, didn't you, Tim, in November?
Was that?
Didn't you bring it up in November?
Yeah.
At a meeting I was just sitting there, yeah.
I'm thinking like attic insulation, you know, there was just a case of,
This,
just get it done.
this is a great illustration of the importance of committees and departments, though, when it comes to the strategic planning meeting and the fiscal planning meeting, to identify the wish list of items like this going forward, and then you don't have so many oh by the ways throughout the year.
Okay, so these two are going forward, right?
Yes.
Okay. Last but not least, I would like to untable the Cruzy Creek project and bring it back to the floor. I took the liberty of contacting Pete McDonald from the Conservancy, Western Reserve Conservancy, and I believe the map that he gave us is up on the screen now. He offered 3 areas that he thought would be a great place for the trees. After speaking with Kaylee and Ted Cruzy and her dad, they'd like to most likely separate the trees and plant trees in each of those 3 areas. And we'd like to go forward with that. So what's the steps to untable?
Make a motion. to
I'd like to make a motion that we untable the Cruzy Creek project.
I'll second.
Discussion. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All right, it's back on the table.
Okay, so I make another motion. I make a motion that based on the map that was given to us by the Western Reserve Conservancy, and we now have 3 possible locations for the trees, I make a motion that we go forward, the council votes and approves the Cruzy Senior Project.
Second.
Discussion.
Jerry, is she going to pick one of these areas, or is she going to do them in all 3?
The discussion was that they will, she initially mentioned that she likes to plant between 12 and 24 trees. But then when I spoke to her at school, she said 24 trees is a lot of trees, so probably somewhere between 12 and 15 or 16, and that an option is that they could plant all those trees in one area, or they can divide them up into the 3 areas.
Okay.
And just to refresh everybody, in that cruising agreement, that there's evidently a younger sister that was, when Kaylee goes off to college, the sister said she helped with the maintenance or looking at them, are they alive, et cetera.
Because she's a freshman in high school.
So we're talking about like 12 trees split between potentially 3 locations, 4 trees each?
I'd say 12, between 12 and 24 trees.
Okay.
They'll be divided.
Been moved and seconded.
Yes.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passed.
Very good. Thank you.
Questions of the property committee?
Can we take a step back for a second? On the insulation, I've got the 3 quotes. How would you want me to proceed that? Do I
That's the motion because.
Okay.
I do.
So Jerry,
We lost all this.
the quote for the insulation for the police department, we would like to go with the quote from Installed Insulation Services in the amount of $4,885.
It's been moved.
Second.
Second, discussion.
I made a motion that we go with a $4,885 contract.
One question, Danielle, isn't this something that would fall under the NOPEC grant, energy efficiency?
Yeah, I will qualify for that, so I will apply tomorrow, not another project. I think the grant was around 20,000,
Yeah.
so we still have more left, but the deadline's coming, so I could ask them to put in escrow for next year, or we can come up with another energy conservation
Does
project.
his door qualify for this energy?
For what?
Does
The
Tim's
door.
door?
It may, I
Should.
can try to find
Yeah.
out.
You can see something.
Absolutely.
door?
And these are like,
It's an
these
insulated door.
Yeah, I'll
are
find out.
reimbursement grants, or it's just there?
They're reimbursing,
Okay.
so I'll apply for the door and, have it tomorrow.
All right, Danielle, I don't know. We moved in second. Did we pass this one?
No.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right.
That's all I have.
All right, questions of the property committee? Before we go to public utilities, I want to take the opportunity on this map here. This is the park, obviously. This is Bell Road here. This is the Muggleton Estate, which was the Maestros Estate. It's 17 acres, and that was recently sold when David moved out. This is the wetlands we created 2 years ago for about $65,000, about $37,000 of our money. Along this line, they planted 16 trees. I haven't been up there in the last month, but the trees were guaranteed for 2 years. And we walked there last year, Tim's guys, and with Davey to look at these trees. So there are 16 trees that were planted along here. And again, there's a 2-year limit. This area here, I'm going to question a little bit. This is, Mother Nature. This is a wet spot on the hill in the park. And just somehow, we got, the water just rises up here. And you can see ducks in here, but I don't know about planting trees out here in the open with the wind blowing across. That's just my opinion. This is the area where we planted trees. I think Mark planted a couple hundred trees, and I think we mowed half of them down. This is basically the cut through from the north end to the south end.
There, I'd say there's probably 2 survivors out of the, 120 or whatever we planted.
There's a lot of trees back there.
I know, but the 2 black walnuts,
Oh, I can check. We're gonna be back.
the other 108 died.
So the opinion of council, where would be the best place to plant these trees?
I would suggest asking Ted Cruz.
Very good.
But they, one of the other things, didn't they say, Jerry, they're putting those tubes to keep the deer out? That was part of it.
Yes, they are.
I can assure you, the tubes we put up on the 110 trees,
Didn't keep the deer out.
All right,
we have unusually large deer.
Oh, deer.
last thing I wanted to comment on this. This area here was not part of land conservancy. Right. We bought these 11 acres. These are houses that are on Deerfield. We bought these 11 acres a couple years ago for like $330,000. So this is a part of the park. It's not a part of land conservancy. I'm done.
Bruce, do you have anything to add to the property?
No, thank you.
All right, public utilities.
Public utilities is you mentioned at the last full meeting of March 18th, you have in your packet the amended language for the petition for the Parkland Dam funds. And it references specifically that the money that they would pay for the engineering study would be non-refundable. And if if the engineering costs actually come in less than the forecast, the 3,000 per home site, that any remaining funds would be applied by the village to the cost of the improvements, which would be whatever the costs are for the dam itself. So this is the next step in resolving potentially the Parkland Dam situation. And I thank the solicitors for providing the language that came from bond council, I think.
Bond council provided this.
Okay, and you're in agreement with it?
I am.
So, Mayor, with that said, what the next step would be to formalize this with some information that needs to be inserted for permanent parcel numbers in the first paragraph. Once we've done that, then we can have this sent to the various Parkland people, homeowners, and
I don't know, is that the process, or just go back to bond council?
I think you would go back to bond council with the parcel numbers filled in, and then bond council, I presume, would be in charge of getting it to each of the homeowners.
That's, I would imagine that it's either that process or she'll figure out the next step.
Yeah,
I think getting this back to her to say it's okay, finalize it.
And if she wants the village to mail it out, I think that's, a lot of envelopes and some stamps. So either way is fine by us, but expeditiously, it could be done by bond council or us. I don't think it matters much. But from that point of view, Mayor, question?
Yes, the county auditor is having a session next Wednesday, the 20th. At that point in time, I intend to ask him about, or ask the law firm, the fees that the homeowners, there's going to be an issue. They hired an engineer, Chris Courtney. I don't know how they hired him. I think it was all verbal. He's never been paid. That may be one of the things. Do we want to have their engineer's cost as a cost for this project? The second issue would be to how far back do we go on our cost for this project, which is, this is going on 2 years. We've probably got $10,000 worth of our money for this project.
Mayor, those would be questions. The Parkland Dam is not adhesive for what you're doing this, so that would be a question for bond council. What the auditor's doing is for the city. This is not a city.
I was just, because
So
Mike,
he won't know the answers. I'm saying.
no,
Those are
Mike
questions.
Weiss is going to be the lawyers, the McDonald's lawyers.
Oh.
So I'm just going to ask, try to get some free advice.
I guess my take there would be that the meter starts running through the engineer when he actually starts doing work on that Parkland project. And that would presume that the 11 homeowners have paid in the $3,000 each for that $33,000, which is the engineer's estimate as to how much it's going to cost. And that money would be applied to the engineer's bills. I don't know that it's fair to the Parkland people or the village that we reach back, I don't know, a year and a half and say to these folks, hey, your money's not only going to pay for the engineer, but all the stuff that happened a year and a half, 2 years ago, you're going to pay for that too. I don't know that we want to do that. Perhaps council has a different opinion on the topic.
Well, the only question I have is, do I understand that they hired an engineer to do some work?
Dennis, I think was probably call my buddy and ask him to look into it.
Well, but that's their costs.
Right.
That has nothing to do with project. If they hired a separate engineer, that ought to be out of their pocket, incidental to anything that's involved with this project.
And if it's the engineer and what he did and what I'm thinking about, that was a pretty rough estimate of what might need to be done.
Right, he had no geotechnical investigation to base it on. He said, it could cost as much as, 400,000 or whatever the number was.
The reason I ask is I'm sure when it comes down to it, there's going to be that question they would be asked us, are we covering the cost of Courtney.
We're not covering the cost of anything.
Well, would that be a cost, part of the cost?
I don't think you can, I don't think you
No, I
can roll it in.
I don't think you should. I don't think you should. That was them realizing that they had a problem and exploring some options before they came to us.
Yeah, Chris, do you have a different take on it?
No, I as sympathetic as I am to Chris Courtney and the work that he did, I don't think that's something to be rolled into the project. I think that's the issue for Parkland Dam to try to resolve with him.
When Preserve hired, put an engineer, they did that on their own, didn't they?
I don't know that, so whatever they did, they took care of themselves. They never gave us a bill for it or asked for payment.
See, I'm also wondering about, we have engineering fees and legal expenses already. Do we eat that and just start it with?
We are allowed to go back.
I would ask bond counsel.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll ask my counsel. All right, thank you.
I think the agreement, the petition can also be interpreted that way as well. But that's not a surprise to the Parkland people, because we've engaged bond counsel, we have the engineer on standby, and they've known this for some time. So I'm fine with, engineering and legal costs from project inception.
Yeah.
We're the public utilities committee.
That's just a concept of operations.
He says,
I think Chris wants to talk about these, but after he's done, I want to mention Paul.
Okay, as part of my conversation with the auditor, I asked the question regarding ESIDs and the concern that we had that if we committed to being in an ESID and yet a group of projects were put together for a common bond process and we were not actively involved in that, would we share in the costs of council and preparing that bond issuance, even though we were not directly involved? So would we get dragged into that without our approval? The answer from the auditor was that if we only get charged if we participate in an ESID project.
In one particular
project. So if there were a number of projects put together, and that's the benefit of the ESID, and we had one of them in South Russell, then we would share in those costs. If we weren't involved, then it was his statement to me that we would not be charged fees. And so that was a concern with being involved. So I thought that was helpful to whether or not we want to participate in an ESID program.
Is there an ESID program out there now?
Well, Bainbridge has already expressed an interest in starting one.
Okay.
Would we voice an opinion to join them?
What's the subject of their ESID?
They have it's relocate a stream across private property, which is causing a flooding issue.
They're having a meeting next week with the county auditor on the 20th, and I forwarded an email to all of you, if anybody else is interested to go. So that, I guess if it's to go to observe or talk or find out if you would be interested as well, so.
So is that,
And you're going to.
yeah, they could, and Mike Weiss will be there.
is that a stormwater kind of issue?
It's a water erosion control.
It has to be water erosion for this
This kind of.
particular SID.
Okay.
It has to deal with water.
Because if it deals with water and it's Bainbridge,
Maybe we ought to talk about family.
Family Life Center,
Okay.
I mean, it's only erosion,
Well,
but if it's water quality, if there's something that follows water, it's not erosion. That might be an
My
opportunity.
understanding that the ESID was specifically created to address erosion issues along Lake Erie. Okay?
Yeah.
That's where it started.
Sure.
Okay? Now it's been broadly interpreted so that if water's involved, you can get into the ESID issue, whether it's water quality, whether it's, you know, flooding, what have you. So,
And you're going to that meeting there on April 20th?
Yes.
Likewise too?
It's in Chuck's office. I don't think it's Zoom directly.
I don't think so, I think it's just an office, and they want, if you're gonna know, they want RSVP, so I don't know how many people, so they can,
Other things on ESID, Chris.
that's,
Public
that's
utilities,
the only comment I have.
I do have something for public utilities.
Yes.
The Manor Brook 319 grant, Eric mentioned we're probably gonna be going out to bid. I think we need a motion to do that, to authorize going out for bid.
We've already done that.
They're not
See, I feel like we did the central detention basin and
we did the retention base one, January 24th, and I don't have anything, and we are making the motion, so we can do the motion.
I would be happy to. I'd like to introduce a motion that engineer, mayor, fiscal officer, and the solicitor take all steps necessary to bid out the work for the 319 Whitetail Manor Brook project. So moved. I know.
Oh, second.
Moved and seconded, discussion. All those in favor, say
What?
aye. Roll call.
Roll call.
Val?
Aye.
Gerger?
Abstain.
Canton?
Abstain.
Kavanaugh?
Aye.
Lippy?
Aye.
Porter?
Aye.
Motion passed.
Thank you.
With that in mind, Vanderbilt, I had a meeting last week, we're having another meeting with the Vanderbilt. The Vanderbilt HOA and Whitetail HOA are gonna come down, sit down in the same room with Aqueduct to talk about their pond. And unless you instruct me otherwise, they want free engineering. And I told them that Eric would not be there, and I'm simply getting them together to talk about their private issue. Frankly, what I'm doing is just working to get to phase 2 and to keep them happy. But you may hear some squabbling because I learned, they want to engineer there. And I said, no, this is their private pond that needs work. That I will provide the room and get somebody from Aqueduct here. But I don't want to get into.
Are you facilitating this, Mayor?
I'm gonna-
You're providing Aqueduct?
I'm going to ask Aqueduct to be.
I think you ought to back off and let the two HOAs work it out.
I don't think I can get them together without facilitating.
Well, I think it's standing into danger by your solicitation. You shouldn't be brokering Aqueduct services with two HOAs.
I'm not brokering, I'm going to have them here and say, here you are.
Here you are, what?
That you people have an issue with your pond, here's the possible solution.
Why aren't the two HOAs working their combined issue with the pond individually, together?
There's issues, I'll just leave it at that.
But is it an issue that requires village interference,
I don't know if it's interference.
engagement?
Actually, it might down the road be beneficial.
How so?
Well, if Whitetail and Manor can resolve their differences, perhaps Manor will be interested in phase 2 of the 319 grant.
I mean, are we acting as an agent for this 319 grant so that we want this to happen? So, we're acting as an agent to broker this agreement and hopefully that Manor will buy in? It sounds that way.
It sounded like the mayor's just trying to get some information.
I think that's true too, and we're not brokering the 319 grant. We are certainly doing phase 1 of the 319 grant. We've advertised to the community that phase 2 is a possibility if Manor is interested in allowing it on their property, because it is private property, but it would certainly benefit the village as a whole to have that project done in terms of stormwater. We have talked about stormwater since I came on council in 2005 or 6. And now we're finally seeing many things done to do that. This is just one part of that. So
I would add that it's also beneficial and I guess in the public's best interest for the retention pond. It's designed as a retention pond. It's on the Manor property to function properly as a retention pond, which right now does not appear to be doing so.
So maybe, Mayor, to take you out of the center of it, you could say to both HOAs, do you have anyone else you'd like to send it after that? Just say that to the presidents of the HOA.
I might suggest just give them an opportunity to stay out of the commercial side with companies, let them figure that out on their own. And this gets you out of it.
Is the reason you're bringing Aqueduct is because you don't want it, you know, they've asked for Eric and you're saying
No, because I think they would probably sit there and talk about all these ideas. They've already been playing amateur engineer way too much on this project. That's why I wanted to try to push them and say, here's one possible solution.
John, for that, that's good knowledge.
Well, and I will give you the historical perspective. Aqueduct's done the work on that pond in the past. They have experience with that issue. So.
I think it's worth noting that the other alternative is, okay, you two don't get along, you don't talk to each other. The village is gonna issue some sort of citation because you have a retention pond that drains onto a public waterway and that retention pond's not working. It behooves you as property owners to get that done preemptively before the village becomes involved.
And that's split 50-50 between Whitetail and Manor.
I don't know how the pond ownership is split.
It's basically 50.
Well, and from a village point of view, it's a stormwater issue because it's a retention.
It is, yes, it is designed as a retention pond.
So that's like one of the 3 retention.
That we actually have, yes.
This is the pond that's to the west of the.
Correct.
Yeah.
They're immediately adjacent to, but west of.
They had some questions when they were here,
Uh-huh.
Yes. If you see me with arrows on my back, you know it didn't go.
Well,
Ordinance and resolution, the first one deals with salt, so the street committee.
Yeah, like Mayor, I'd like to introduce the resolution authorizing participation in the ODOT winter contract 018-23 for road salts. Move the way further readings and declare emergency.
We need a second. Roll call.
Aye. Turner.
Aye.
Stanton.
Aye.
Kavanaugh.
Aye.
Woody. Porter.
Aye, move to adopt.
Bell.
Aye.
Turner.
Aye.
Stanton.
Aye.
Kavanaugh.
Aye.
Woody.
Aye.
Porter.
Aye.
Ordinance passed. Next one, Chris. HR.
Introduce an ordinance repealing ordinance 2022-17 and adopting pay schedules and a tiered system for South Russell Village employees and declaring emergency first reading.
All right, we are now,
I'd like to introduce and consider adoption of an ordinance amending the annual appropriations, increasing street maintenance fund expenses, $94,835. For MISR fund expenses, $138,000. ARPA fund expenses, $128,000. And income tax transfers, $240,835, declaring an emergency and waiving further reading. So moved.
Second.
roll call.
Bell.
Aye.
Turner.
Aye.
Stanton.
Aye.
Kavanaugh.
Aye.
Woody.
Aye.
Porter.
Aye.
Motion to adopt?
Second.
Bell.
Aye.
Turner. Stanton.
Aye.
Kavanaugh.
Aye.
Woody.
Aye.
Porter.
Aye.
Ordinance passed. Let's go to the sale of village property, right above that one.
I would like to introduce and consider for adoption the sale of village personal property not needed by the village and declaring an emergency. Wait for the readings, so moved.
Second.
Roll call.
Bell.
Aye.
Turner.
Aye.
Stanton.
Aye.
Kavanaugh.
Aye.
Woody.
Aye.
Porter.
Aye.
Motion to adopt?
Second.
Bell.
Aye.
Turner.
Aye.
Stanton.
Aye.
Kavanaugh.
Aye.
Woody.
Aye.
Porter.
Aye.
I'd like to introduce and consider adoption of an ordinance transferring from the income tax fund to the Vermiship tax fund, $18,000, street maintenance fund, $94,835, ARPA fund $128,000 and declaring an emergency. Wait for the reading, so
We'll
moved.
do the second.
Second.
Roll call.
Berger.
Aye.
Canton.
Aye.
Kavanaugh.
Aye.
Lippy.
Aye.
Porter.
Aye.
Move to adopt.
Motion, yeah. Thanks, Rich.
Bell.
Aye.
Berger.
Aye.
Canton.
Aye.
Kavanaugh.
Aye.
Lippy.
Aye.
Porter.
Aye.
Motion to, ordinance passed. Chris, resolution.
Introduce a resolution of appreciation for David Maestros.
Maestros.
I apologize.
First reading.
First reading.
Okay.
Introduce a resolution of appreciation for Laura LaChapelle. First reading.
Okay, and we are now, streets.
If you may, I'd like to introduce an ordinance authorizing the mayor and fiscal officer and the engineer to enter into an agreement with Specialized Construction, Inc. to form the 2022 Village Road Program in the amount of $675,551.30, declaring an emergency. Move to waive further readings.
Second.
Roll call.
Bell. Berger.
Aye.
Canton.
Aye.
Kavanaugh.
Aye.
Lippy.
Aye.
Porter.
Aye. Move to adopt.
Second.
Bell.
Aye.
Berger.
Aye.
Canton.
Aye.
Kavanaugh.
Aye.
Lippy.
Aye.
Porter.
Aye.
All right, we have two bill splits. No, pardon me, that ordinance passed. We have two bill splits. Finance, you're up.
Well, do we have two bills lists or just addition?
There's a, well, I just, got on today, so you have the one from March 30th and then one.
Okay.
Daniel, we're ratifying the March 30th one,
Yes.
First.
Approving,
April 13th.
Okay.
I get it.
All right, so I'd like to make a motion to ratify the bills of March 30th, 2022 in the amount of $55,719.67. So moved.
We need a second.
Second.
Roll, discussion, motion,
Uh,
vote.
Make a roll.
9:27
Mayor, we need a roll call.
Roll call, okay.
okay, Bell.
Aye.
Berger.
Abstain.
Canton. Kavanaugh.
Aye.
Lippy.
Aye.
Porter.
Aye.
Motion passed.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the bills list of 4/13/22 in the amount of $64,247.37. So moved.
Second.
Bell.
Aye.
Berger.
Abstain.
Canton.
Abstain.
Kavanaugh.
Aye.
Lippy.
Aye.
Porter.
Aye.
Do other. Thank you all.
New other, Bell. Berger.
I just want to inform council, looking at where it is. I will not be here in person on May 23rd, but we'll hope to join you by whatever the technology is, should it work, where I will be, which is not in the country. So I'm just letting you know.
Which will be here on the 20th.
I will not be here on the 20th.
Not here.
Okay, Canton. New other.
Yes, I move the council go into executive session pursuant to section 121.22, letter G and number 2 of the Ohio Revised Code for the purpose of considering purchasing property for a public purpose, and that the following individuals be invited into executive session: Mayor Coons, Friday Buffini, and Danielle Romanowski. That's it.
Do you want to do that now since we just made a motion?
Or we could, hold off on it.
I'm
There's no
sorry.
reason to keep the other people here and wait for us to come out, right? The chief, Tim, the engineer.
What's your name?
Any
And
other
is there,
business?
There's a minor one.
new other,
Just briefly, regarding Paw, the response to Rich Haber, the engineer has said in the past multiple times that the silting of Paw silt pond is not the result of the Dominion project that we in the village did. And to the extent that's an answer to what he's been asking, in my view at least, it is. So that may be addressed in other ways, but it's not because the village did something or Dominion did something. And that's been our consistent response every time that question has been asked for the last 5 years. That's all I have, Danielle.
Mr. Jennison. And you other,
I do. We have it was just in the packet, One Ohio something, and it has to do with, do we want to join in a regional, committee about the drug problem? I'll look at that and I'll decide. Linda Mattern, I talked to her today and I started on the 100th, what my report's gonna be, and I'm excited about it, and she was very helpful. The third and last thing is, I found the 1953 aerial picture of Papa Lick, and I gave it to Danielle, and she's kind enough to get it reframed and so on. So I'm looking forward to it being up.
Are we gonna put that on the website?
Yeah.
The picture?
we're trying with the 100 year to get a bunch of pictures from around the village and put them around Village Hall and then display them at the 100 year celebration.
Now, we used to have years ago, 4 years plus, we used to have a lot of pictures of historic homes and everything else on our village website.
Zero, I think.
But then they got all disappeared.
No, we're in the basement.
Okay, that's everybody's thing about it.
Okay, now we're back to Jerry.
Second motion.
Okay, roll call on the drawing in. Need a roll.
Bell. Berger.
Aye.
Canton. Kavanaugh. Lickey.
Thank you all.
Do we have to have one adjourned?
No, we're not adjourning.
Executive session.
I thought we adjourned.